So apparently, because Carol doesn't really have a chin, when she wears a helmet, the chin strap doesn't really sit where it should. And in this little thumbnail picture, it kind of looks like she has a 5 o'clock shadow, which may actually be an improvement. At the end of our last episode, Andy had completed 2 of the 4 milestones of his aspiration, which put him on to starting the 3rd. And for this he was going to have to build a rocket ship. He owned the rocket ship and it barely fit into the asylum, and now he was going to have to work on it. Surprisingly, he stayed in a relatively good mood doing this, and that really is surprising because Andy's the sort of person who likes to tell you that he's got a lot of work to do, but when he actually does have a lot of work to do, he tends to get into quite an unpleasant mood. Which begs the question, does Andy ever actually have any work to do? It seemed so out of character for Andy to be happy when he was hard at work. But the happiness didn't last long, as soon he found himself feeling dazed from mental fog. Andy feeling dazed from being allegedly overworked? That's a bit more like it. That's a bit more like the Andy that we all know. Despite being dazed and finding various excuses and stressing out about nothing, Andy did eventually complete the rocket, which meant it was time to either upgrade it or take a trip into space in order to advance through the next steps of his aspiration. And of course, as we go to do that, we find that Andy is just very tense because he is now completely burnt out. The first bit of work he's had to do since joining the asylum, and it has completely broken him, so much so he won't even do a creative task to clear his mental fog. Literally the only thing he can do is go for a jog. After spending a sufficient amount of time doing absolutely nothing, Andy finally cheered up, and then it was time to get him to upgrade the rocket. As it turned out, he didn't have enough rocket science skill to do so, and so that only meant one other thing. While Andy was in space, he encountered a series of unusual events, and made all the best possible decisions to deal with each of them. Despite experiencing a number of issues, Andy had managed to reach level 5 of the handiness skill, and he had completed 3 missions in space, which had allowed him to make some decent progress on his aspiration. And after one more trip into space, Andy was almost done with the 3rd milestone of his aspiration, and so he lined up a 5th trip into space, which would allow him to complete this milestone and finally move on to the 4th and final milestone of his aspiration. And as Andy returns from that 5th trip, he has completed the 3rd milestone of his aspiration, putting him on to the final milestone, Nerd Brain. For his final milestone, Andy will have to achieve level 10 of the logic skill and fix or upgrade 5 objects. Not long now, until he finally finishes his aspiration and leaves the asylum. And as Andy sets about upgrading objects around the asylum, and completing that vital 4th and final milestone of his aspiration, we'll leave his story there for today. Join us next time as he works through building his logic skill to level 10, which, let's face it, is going to take a long time, with Andy not being a particularly logical person, and finally is able to leave the asylum. Thanks for watching. There's a burglar on the lot. This is the 2nd time the asylum has been robbed. And I don't have Ailish here to fight the burglar off, but that's okay because I do have Elgers, and no one loves a fight more than Elgers Yellow. I remember one time Stuart asked everyone to come up with ideas to raise money for charity, to do things like, come to work dressed in fancy dress or go for a sponsored walk or something, and Elgers had the idea that he would challenge people to a cage fight and sell tickets to watch. But that's just Elgers for you.